Conventions of the horror genre. Setting. The setting of a horror film plays a huge part in how the audience is affected by the plot. If the setting is not scary enough or inappropriate for the themes and plot of the film, then the overall impact on the audience will not be as strong. Conventional settings in horror films tend to include houses, streets, towns, and wooded areas. These settings aren't particularly scary on their own, but with added atmospheric conventions and storylines, they can be turned into something much scarier. Horror films are often dimly lit, which touches on a common fear of darkness and low visibility. This is unnerving for most people as darkness has connotations of danger. Even though the setting in some horror films seems quite ordinary, such as a town, street or house, the storyline reveals that there is some dark history, like abandoned houses and haunted hotels. For example, the haunting in Connecticut house used to be a morgue where seances were held, and in Sinister the family moved into a murder house. The reason why these settings are so effective is because it draws the audience into the story. By making the locations seem everyday, makes the audience feel like it could happen to them, therefore making it more terrifying. Another frequent convention is that the setting in the film is often very isolated, making it hard for the protagonist to find help quickly, or even at all. Isolated towns or houses, such as the one in the cabin in the woods, touches on the common fear of being alone in an unknown place, where no one can help you or hear you if you're in trouble. Even if the film is set in a place where you would presume help is readily available, the character is still isolated in some way. For example, the phone lines are cut, or the protagonist's friends and family or the authorities won't take them seriously. Technical codes. There are a few technical codes that are frequently used in horror filming. These codes can convey a particular atmosphere to the audience by helping to build suspense, convey status of power, highlight important details, and overall make the film scarier. Some examples of technical codes that are often used in horror filming include high and low camera angles. These angles can be used to connote fear or to create an ominous effect on the situation. They can also convey status and power. Dutch tilts are used to create an unnatural effect. This can make the audience feel uncomfortable, which can build tension. Steadicam and handheld shots make the film more realistic and puts the audience in the action, which is much more effective for creating tension than smoother shots, as it appears to the audience as more processed and fake. Point of view shots allow the audience to see the world from the protagonist or the antagonist perspective. By using these shots, it makes the audience feel like they're there in the action, which, when used in a horror context, can be very effective at scaring the audience. Depth of field can be used to make things less obvious and scarier. It can hide things or make them harder to see in the background or foreground, which can make the audience tense, waiting for the characters to interact. Framework in the shots can help the editors to hide the antagonist from the audience. It's an easy way to make the antagonist appear out of nowhere, and if the audience do see them approaching, because it is made harder to see, there is more tension built up. Disturbing sound effects such as screams, heavy breathing, and electrical glitch sounds are often used to make the audience feel uncomfortable and nervous. Ambient diegetic sounds like footsteps and non-diegetic sounds like heartbeats, screams, monster sounds can also be used to create tension. Extreme close-ups on victims' faces can show the audience the emotions that they are feeling. ECUs on the antagonist's face or part of their body, for example, close-up of them holding a bloody knife, can increase tension and make the audience scared for the victims. ECUs can also be used as a scare tactic. For example, a sudden ECU on an antagonist's face can make the audience jump. Editing can help to create tension and uncertainty. 3. Pace. Iconography. Dark colours like red and black are used frequently as they have connotations that relate to the horror genre. Lighting is expressive and abnormal. Low-key lighting can help to create dark shadows and unfamiliar shapes. Lighting could be used in terms of props such as night vision camera work and characters using lamps and torches to make it more realistic. Specific props relate to the horror genre such as knives, weapons, masks, icons of the supernatural, and religious icons. Iconography of monsters help to connote fear, disgust, and terror. Therefore, characters like zombies, demons, vampires, werewolves, and mutations are often featured. Narrative structure. Narratives in horror films can often be left open-ended to leave room for a sequel, or just to leave the audience on the edge of their seat. For example, Friday the 13th, Paranormal Activity, and Nightmare on Elm Street. These kinds of ending imply that there is no escape from the antagonists. There is often at least one person that survives everything and manages to escape. Character types. The antagonist is usually something like a monster, mutation, alien, or psychopathic human. Often something that can not only scare the audience through actions, but also through visual aspects too. For example, a monster can be scary to look at, and human antagonists in horror films are frequently seen to be wearing masks or be disfigured in some way. This could be the basis of a backstory, which can help to explain to the audience why they are doing what they are doing. There is usually a backstory to the antagonist, such as a troubled childhood. The antagonist usually has a warped idea that the victims deserve it. For example, they've done something bad in their life, like in Saw. The main protagonist, often the victim hero of the movie, often conveyed as stupid, easier target, and more vulnerable. Although the antagonist of the film is obviously a very important part, the type of protagonist also plays a very significant role in how the audience views the monster. The most effective kind of protagonist in horror films generally seems to be a very average person. By making the protagonist unextraordinary and average, it helps the audience to identify with and relate to the character. This can result in a scarier horror because the audience see themselves in that situation. Horror relies on the weakness of the protagonist in order to make it scary. This relates to the average character usually chosen to play this part, and also touches on the fears of many people, such as feeling scared and in danger when in a place that you assume to be safe. By making the protagonist much weaker and seemingly powerless towards the forces they face, creates a much scarier storyline than one where the forces match, as the audience is less concerned for the character. There are 3 types of protagonist. 1, the one that overcomes. 2, the one that fails. And 3, the one that is the horror itself. Number 1. This type of protagonist is the one that, in the end, overcomes whatever evil it has been faced with. This occurs when the antagonist is arrested or killed or defeated in any way, and/or the protagonist escapes and life returns as much as possible to normal. These types of protagonists are usually seen in American horror films such as Scream and The Evil Dead, usually films with a physical antagonist such as a serial killer or zombie. At first they seem outmatched, but throughout the film they learn and begin to fight back against the force, resulting in victory. Because this type of protagonist leaves the antagonist defeated, it takes some of the horror and scare out of the end, leaving the audience feeling more confident about the situation. 2. The type of protagonist that fails, however, leaves the audience feeling extremely powerless against the forces that may be. This is the type that is eventually killed or consumed in some way by the evil that it is faced with. This type of ending to a horror film tends to scare us more than the ones that end with the protagonist's victory, because it leaves the audience imagining themselves failing in that situation. This type of protagonist can often be conveyed as a protagonist that overcomes, but then at the last moment all of their control is shown to be an illusion. For example, The Ring and A Nightmare on Elm Street. 3. This is a protagonist that reflects the darker nature in the audience. They are conveyed as someone the audience can like and respect or even relate to, but throughout the course of the film we begin to realise that they are the horror as they corrupt themselves, or we are shown in a plot twist that they are in fact the antagonist. This type of protagonist is often the worst because not only does it scare the audience, but it can leave them deeply disturbed as they see a character they would previously relate to become sick and twisted. For example, Dorian Gray. These types of characters don't rely on cheap scare tactics to make the audience jump, but play on deeper, more psychological fears. However, there is another rare kind of protagonist, the main example being Marion Crane from Alfred Hitchcock's film Psycho. In this case, the film opens with Marion being the main character, but she is killed partway through the film. This makes the murder much more unexpected and shocking, makes the audience feel like they are more vulnerable and disposable as the seemingly main character was. This surprise makes it harder for the audience to predict what will happen in the film, therefore making it more tense and scary. Themes. These are some of the most conventional themes that occur in horror films. These are the themes that seem to impact the audience most, so I must work to include these in my own film idea.